No SEC football coaches were fired last season. All that means is that an abundance of SEC coaches entered this season on the hot seat. But who's on the hottest seat in the conference? We'll discuss that and more today on this edition of SEC Football Unfiltered, our podcast from the USA Today Network. I'm Blake Toppmeyer alongside John Adams on this very special seat edition of the pod. John, we've been kicking around this idea for months now, really, and we're just kind of saving it up because there is much to discuss, and we're each going to go through our top 5 hot seat lists today, conference. But just looking across the terrain, really, I think you could go deeper than a 5-man list on who's, if not the hot seat, then at least in the same state, and then maybe in the same county as the hot seat.
Yeah, it's not a distant zip code. And you know from experience how quickly someone can go from SEC Coach of the Year to the top of the hot seat list. It can happen in a matter of weeks. So, yeah, you're right. There may be somebody out of our top 5 we each list below that who's fired at the end of the season. I wouldn't bet against that.
Yeah, and then you see other coaches that maybe could be toward the top of the list that I don't know if you ever truly escape the hot seat once you're on it, but you can navigate away from it a little bit. We saw that to a certain degree with Billy Napier last year. He spent most of the season on the hot seat, but then Florida finished the year strong, and it almost felt like Napier started the season on a hotter seat than he ended it on. However, he's still, as I'm sure we will discuss, in hot seat terrain as we enter this season. So, John, you and I have not compared lists. We each got our 1 through 5 here, but we don't know who's on each other's list. I'm sure there's going to be some overlap, but let's just get it started at number 5, and then we'll progress toward number 1, which would be, as we see it, the absolute hottest seat in the SEC. So why don't you get us going here with number 5 on your SEC hot seat list?
Who would you guess that it is?
Who would I guess it is? I would guess Mark Stoops.
No.
Okay. Boy, you just bluntly put that one aside.
What's the opposite of hot? It's cold. And what's really cold? It's freezing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I see where we're going now.
Lead in Hugh Freeze, who I've really kind of rallied behind in his brief time at Auburn, and decided to jump off that bandwagon a few weeks ago, and so I'm staying off it. But he's 11-14 at Auburn in 2 seasons. Auburn is not renowned for patience. I mean, Gus Malzahn never had a losing season there, played for a national championship, and still got fired after 8 seasons. Hugh Freeze, I thought would do a good job there, and he still might. But I just don't like the way things that I'm getting a bad vibe going into this season, and part of that is I listen to you too much. I mean, you're constantly ripping Hugh Freeze just as you did Brian Harsin, his predecessor. You just got a thing for ripping Auburn coaches. Maybe it's my own frailty that I'm, that I'm swayed by that, but it's just a fact.
Well, and some might argue that you should be swayed even more, John, having Hugh at number 5 on your list and not higher. But yeah, I mean, go ahead.
Well, so that tells me you think I've underrated his firing potential.
Don't want to give it all away, but I mean, I think you said it well with Hugh Freeze. He's 11-14 after 2 seasons. That's a key number you can't ignore. And a little history lesson for you, John. Can you list off the number of Auburn coaches who had 3 straight losing seasons and were back for year 4? In other words, if Hugh Freeze has a 3rd straight losing season, whose company would he enjoy? Who would he join in trying to come back for year 4?
Yeah.
There's a reason you're stumped. There is no list. No Auburn coach has ever had 3 straight losing seasons and then been invited back for a year 4.
I was trying so hard. I thought way back to the 70s and Doug Barfield. I remember watching one of his teams at Mississippi State. And that was the best I could come up with. I was really trying to think, well, surely there's somebody, but there's
sort of
not,
a trick question there. But that's just it, right? I mean, I think the task for Hugh Freeze is abundantly clear. Like it has to be better this year, or I think he's going to be gone. And I don't know that 6-6 gets it done. We heard Hugh say earlier this offseason how he understands how important it is for him to make a bowl game. It's like I don't think 6-6 and going to the basket weaving bowl is necessarily going to lead to Hugh being invited back for a 4th season. But yeah, Earl Brown, you may have been thinking of back just on the heels of World War II, John. He had 3 straight losing seasons at Auburn, but he was not invited back for year 4. I don't know what your recollection is of the Earl Brown era in the late 1940s.
I did. You might be surprised to know I never wrote a column about Earl Brown.
I am a little surprised. Yeah, you're still in junior high, I guess, at that.
But if I would have written one, I would have said he has to go.
Absolutely.
Kick him to the curb right now.
I'm sure they were writing that 75 years ago when Earl Brown did indeed go. But the other problem for Hugh Freeze, in year 2, even as the losses mounted on the field, he had that recruiting success he could point to, and that can buy an extra year, I think, for a struggling coach in year 2. But he's got 2 problems on that front here in year 3. Number one, as we discussed a couple weeks ago on the pod, his recruiting momentum has stalled, and so he cannot point to that anymore as his saving grace. And then number 2, even if recruiting were going better for Auburn, I think by year 3, that can't be the only thing you're hanging your hat on. By year 3, you need to start showing some progress on the field and not just the recruiting trail. So Auburn's not recruiting well so far in this cycle anyway, but even if it was recruiting much better, I don't think that's enough in year 3. Hugh's got to win some games, and so he will be featured later on my list, but he's not my number 5. So my number 5, John, I kind of tipped my hand whenever I predicted or guessed who I thought might be number 5 on your list. My number 5 is Mark Stoops, a man who for so long at Kentucky seemed unfireable because for a good chunk of his tenure at Kentucky, Stoops has overachieved as compared to historical standards for that program. Life was pretty good on Kentucky and Mark Stoops in the days of divisions. Kentucky had a couple 10-win seasons, but the bloom is off the rose a little bit for Mark Stoops at Kentucky. I think we both believe that the elimination of divisions, the 16-team nature of the SEC with Texas and Oklahoma in the fold, those are not great developments for Mark Stoops at Kentucky. And also, it's just been trending down, the past couple seasons. And we know Mark Stoops tried to get out of town and head to Texas A&M just about a year and a half ago. Well, that probably would have been the best case scenario for him because now he's coming on the heels of a 4-8 season. I think the outlook looks relatively bleak this year. He won just 1 SEC game last year. He's still an expensive man to fire for Kentucky football. And like I said, at one time, it would have seemed just unfathomable that Mark Stoops could be approaching the hot seat at Kentucky. But I think he's found that terrain now on the heels of going 4-8 last year and just downward momentum really for the last couple of seasons. I mean, you go back to 2021, Kentucky went 10-3. They won the Citrus Bowl. They finished in the top 25. Everything seemed great at that point. Couple 7-win seasons on the heels of that, and then 4-8 last year, and you mix in his flirtation with the exits a couple years ago for Texas A&M, which, that trial balloon got shot down by the Aggies. They didn't end up wanting Mark Stoops, but now I think he's in a vulnerable spot, as vulnerable a spot as he's ever been, I think, at Kentucky.
It's interesting, though, when people have often sung the praises of Mark Stoops through 12 seasons. This is his 12th season, I think, at Kentucky. He's the dean of SEC coaches. A remarkable achievement to last that long. But we're talking about a low bar here. I was always amused when he's winningest Kentucky football coach. Won more than Bear Bryant did there. Well, Bear Bryant didn't stick around, and he
Yeah.
wasn't fired. He had bigger and better things in mind. He was planned on winning 6 national titles at Alabama and did really well at A&M too. So that was that. I always got a chuckle out of that. But for all of his longevity and for a couple of 10-win seasons, he's 77-73. Career wise, there. I mean, you're still in the SEC, and that's hard to justify keeping a coach that long in this conference, unless you just say we plan on being mediocre. That's our goal. We want to be mediocre. We want to have a world-class basketball program, football, get as many people as we can into the stadium, and maybe go to a bowl game. But I look at the schedule. I would make Kentucky an underdog in every game.
In
And
conference play.
in conference play.
Yeah.
And when you're entrusting your offense to Zach Calzada,
Yeah, seventh-year quarterback at Kentucky, now on his 4th school. But hey, Zach Calzada once led Texas A&M many, many, many moons ago, John, to an upset win against Alabama.
Yeah, he did. And that game is maybe I need to rewatch that game because I still have a hard time believing that happened. I can imagine Johnny Manziel beating a Nick Saban team, but Zach Calzada? I think it's interesting that the school with the longest tenured coach in the SEC might have the longest tenured quarterback in college football, or at least in the same class. I just look at this schedule and I don't see any hope for him. He's higher on my list. I won't tip my hand, but he's higher on my list.
Okay, yeah, and you mentioned his record in 12 seasons at Kentucky, 77-73, and you said like if you're just comfortable with mediocrity and think this is what Kentucky football is, you could stay with that. I think you could make a stronger argument though for staying course with a record at Kentucky if the momentum was trending up, right? Like if Mark Stoops coming off an 8 or 9 or 10 win year and was his record, you think, well, hey, the best of this era is not behind him, but I think the best of the Mark Stoops era is behind him. And so not only, are you resigning yourself to a fate of it is what it is, I think you're also resigning yourself to sticking with a coach whose best days at Kentucky are behind him. And when things were good, they were pretty good in comparison to what the expectation is at Kentucky. And I know they don't always play, well, they never play the toughest schedule, but the fact that he had 2 10-win seasons in a 4-year span and then also had an 8-5 season mixed in there. I mean, there was a 4-year stretch in which Mark Stoops won 33 games. That's pretty darn good at Kentucky. But that stretch is over, and I don't think that stretch is coming back. He's also bemoaned the lack of NIL momentum around Kentucky football. That's not a smart move, I think, as a coach, because when you're a coach, you're not just a fundraiser, but the quickest way, and we've seen this with Kentucky basketball, right? The quickest way to kind of invigorate donors, to bring some new life, some new blood, some new energy around the fundraising of a program, sometimes the quickest and easiest way to do that is to change your coach. And so I think Mark Stoops might want to be a little more careful than some of his past comments bemoaning the lack of NIL support around his program.
I think his best hope to survive as Kentucky's coach would have been, he's missed the opportunity, would have been to spend all of his last year's salary in the transfer portal. He's now got the second best program in the state of Kentucky.
Mm.
And if you're an NIL booster, do you think, well, man, I really think I'm going to throw a few $1,000,000 Mark Stoops' way and see if we can win 2 SEC games this year. I know we got to play Vanderbilt and Nashville, but maybe if I invest a little more, we can pull that off and get within hailing distance of a bowl game. No, if you're NIL backer Kentucky, you say, I'm giving the money to the other Mark,
Right.
Mark Pope, and try and win a national championship in basketball. Not try to go to the, what do they call the bowl in Shreveport now? Does it even have a name, or is it the
I
No
think it
Name
has a
Bowl?
name, but it's eluding me, John.
Yeah, with the,
Eh,
what was the Pula? Is it Pula Weed Eater Bowl of
There's a
days gone by?
Gasparilla Bowl in Florida, but that's not the one
Gasparilla.
in that's
Yeah.
not the one in Shreveport. I can't remember what that one in
It,
Shreveport's
well, it's
called
the
now.
Independence Bowl without a sponsor, and
Right, but who's
I
sponsoring it? I don't know.
I don't know why anybody would sponsor that any more than they would give Mark Stoops NIL money. So,
It looks like a technology company, John, one that I've never
oh,
heard
that's
of.
great. Yeah.
Yeah, we think the world of him. But
Oh,
okay,
no
so Mark
question.
Stoops is number 4 on my list. You've hinted he's higher on your list. Who do you have at number 4 on your SEC hot seat rankings?
I'm going with Brent Venables of Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm. Don't call
Uh,
him Brett, which you've done in the past.
no, I only did that a couple of times.
I know.
Like, let's don't
You want me to
make.
retire that one? I think you want me to retire it because I think if I start calling him Brett, you might think that's his real name again.
Oh, there's no question. I think, yeah, you need to drop that right now.
Okay.
And if you keep it up, I'm gonna go after you and KJ Jefferson.
Oh
Where's
boy.
KJ these days? I
I'm
forgot.
surprised he's not quarterback in Kentucky. 7th year guy, Zach
I tell you
Calzada.
what, I would take him over Zach Calzada in a heartbeat.
Me too. You know how much I love KJ.
I know you do.
Okay, so you got
So,
Venables at 4 here, 2 losing seasons in a 3-year span. Lay out the case for Venables being number 4.
well, he's at Oklahoma.
Yeah.
I mean, I know he's got a winning record. He's 22-17. He had a 10-win season, but that was in between 2 losing seasons. The only reason he's still the coach at Oklahoma is the buyout. And as much money as the Sooners have, that was still a close call, I bet. You just can't have 2 losing seasons in 3 years at Oklahoma. And let's say the Sooners are much improved this year and win 8 games. 9 games. Say they go 9-4. That's not what Oklahoma football is about. They're supposed to contend for national championships. So I just don't see how he can make it. And then the schedule. It's absolutely brutal. I think Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner, when he welcomed Oklahoma into the league, he turned to one of his underlings and said, "You know what? Just for fun, let's see if we can get that Venables guy fired." Here's my
I mean, it really
intermission.
is like this schedule was designed to get a coach fired.
Sure.
Florida excuse me, it's either Oklahoma or Florida, I think, that have the toughest schedule in the country. It's one of those two. I
Oh,
mean, it's brutal. It's a brutal conference draw, and then they play Michigan, who will be probably a top 25 team in the non-conference. So there's nowhere to hide in that conference schedule, and then you throw in Michigan. I mean, there's 9 big boys on Oklahoma's schedule, and the thing of it is, I think their roster is significantly improved. I know we're both really high on the transfer quarterback, John Mateer, but you could have a significantly improved roster and still go about 2-6 or 3-5 in conference play when you consider that schedule. And I mean, that's the type of conference record that gets a 4th-year coach fired at Oklahoma.
yeah, and you look at what else is going on. You just came into the SEC. I mean, this is one of the most storied programs in college football. And its detractors would say, well, you did that in the Big 12 or the Big 8, but you can't do that playing with the big boys in the SEC, which
Texas
is
did.
Yeah, exactly. Your biggest rival comes in and goes to the playoffs.
Yeah.
And so that just heightens the embarrassment factor for Oklahoma fans. I just don't see how there's any path to his returning to Oklahoma as a head coach.
I mean, I think he's going to have to. I think this schedule, this roster is going to have to be significantly improved, which we think it is, but it's going to have to be so improved that it can handle this schedule to the tune of like a 9-3 record. I mean, 9-3 against this schedule probably gets Brent Venables back for another season. But then it comes back to, how do you go 9-3 against this schedule?
Yeah, I mean, how would if you go 9-3 with this schedule, you're in the conversation for the college football playoff.
Absolutely, yeah.
Have to be.
Yeah, there's never been a 3-loss team in the playoff, but there were 3-loss
Yeah,
teams in the conversation last year, the first year of the
right.
12-year playoff. And I think Oklahoma would have a stronger resume if they could get to 9-3 than some of those teams that were on the outside looking in last year. It's just a matter of getting to 9-3, which is easier said than done. Okay, we'll save Venables' further discussion for now because I have a feeling he'll be reappearing later in this pod. So I had Mark Stoops at number 5. My number 4, John, is someone who would have been number 1 about 9 or 10 months ago on my list. But Billy Napier, I think, cooled the flames a little bit by the way last season finished. You know who the president is at Florida right now, John? Another trick question. There is no president at Florida. They've had an interim president.
You got me again, Blake. I'm just saying. Let's see, who is the president there?
Yeah, all I got for you today is trick questions.
Okay.
Has been operating with an interim president for like over a year now. They tried to hire a president this summer. The Board of Governors said not so fast. That attempt got rejected, and so Florida still has no university president going on more than a year now. And so you have AD Scott Strickland there, who is firmly in Billy Napier's corner. He was the one that gave him the vote of confidence last November and said, we're going to ride this thing out. And, you know, if a new president was in place and got the sense that maybe that president wanted to shake some things up, I might have Billy higher than 4 on my list. But when you combine the way Florida finished last season, they got to 8-5. It's not the standard, but they played as well as they ever have under Billy Napier to finish last season. Now you got DJ Lagway back. You got an AD who's firmly in the coach's corner, and you got an interim president who's been there for over a year and didn't act last year. So I think Napier certainly belongs on the list. He's at number 4 on mine. Like I said, 9 or 10 months ago, I would have had him even higher, but he, from where I sit, he cooled down the hot seat a little bit as compared to what it was last fall.
Yeah, I think people overreacted to Florida's success last season. The way it finished this season. Go back to that early season game against Miami when it was totally overwhelmed. And I think if Jeremy Foley would have been the AD, he would have said, get this guy out of here right now. I never want to look at him again.
But Lagway became the starter in the middle of the season, John.
I know.
And they beat LSU and Ole Miss, two 9-win teams.
Yeah, I realize that, but I just forget last season and just look overall. I mean, they still only won 8 games. Do you think DJ Lagway is Tim Tebow? Is he Danny Werfel? Maybe he is, but he doesn't have the talent around him that those quarterbacks did. I know Florida was better.
Yeah, I agree with the supporting cast. I think Lagway has an incredible upside. I don't know if it's Tim Tebow or Danny Werfel level, but I do think if he's healthy, which we know he had the offseason shoulder procedure, if he's 100% by the season opener, I think he's got a great upside. I think he has the type of supporting cast that Tim Tebow had in the Urban Meyer heyday. And you go back to an earlier conversation with Oklahoma, the schedule. Florida plays 10 Power 4 opponents. Most SEC teams only play 9. So their non-conference schedule includes a road game at Miami. They got Florida State. And they have like 6 teams from the SEC that I think will be ranked in the preseason. It's like 5 or I think it's 6. 6 of their 8 SEC opponents I think are going to be ranked in the preseason top 25. So it's another brutal schedule. And I won't argue that Billy Napier is not still on the hot seat. I just don't have him as high as I would have had him last year.
Well, when I look at that schedule, the first half of it, I mean, it's tough all the way through, but in the first half of the season, you play at LSU, at Miami, then play Texas, and then at Texas A&M. I'm not sure Florida wins any of those games. And the other thing, we keep talking about DJ Lagway. What he do in the offseason? He rested his arm.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what if he gets a tired arm in October? He's had some shoulder issues. I think that's a concern. There's no DJ Lagway to bring off the bench like Florida had last year. I don't think when
No,
Graham
yeah,
Mertz went
yeah.
down.
DJ Lagway is in the lineup, and you're right. There's no extra Lagway behind him. There's no Lagway 2.0 as the backup quarterback. And Harrison Daly is the backup quarterback who's kind of been all over. Started his career at Tennessee as a backup quarterback there, and it's very well traveled at this point. So yeah, I mean, I think Napier could find himself right back where he was last October within the first several weeks of the season if it doesn't keep going the way it ended last year. So I get the sense he must be higher on your list. Let's move to your number 3, John.
Yeah, it's Billy Napier.
Okay, there we go.
That was easy. And and still so he got better last year. Florida got better. Big picture here. Look what Steve Spurrier did at Florida. Look what Urban Meyer did at Florida. And Billy Napier's 19-19 after 3 seasons. Look what Dan Mullen did at Florida.
Yeah, I think you may have buried the lead there, John, because expecting Billy Napier to be Urban Meyer, well, that's one thing. But expecting him to be Dan Mullen, who got fired in year 4, no, I think those are fair expectations. Maybe you shouldn't expect him to be Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer is a once-in-a-generation type of coach, and Steve Spurrier is well, I mean, he's a once in a lifetime type of coach, once in multiple lifetimes types of coach for Florida. They just happen to have 2 because Urban Meyer came around later, right? But you nailed it with Mullen. Like, is it too much to expect Billy Napier to be Urban Meyer? Maybe that's unfair. It's absolutely not too much to expect him to be Dan Mullen, and so far he hasn't been. He hasn't been that good.
Blake, I don't know if he can be Jim McElwain.
Mm.
We forget about him. He was fired. Look at his record. It's better than Billy Napier's.
Yeah. No argument. I mean, we see this pretty similarly, John. I mean, I got him at number 4 on my list. You got him at number 3. I think we're looking through the same lenses for the most part at Billy's situation at Florida this year.
Yeah.
Who's got the better? If someone were to survive, John, Brent Venables or Billy Napier, because I look at both those guys as with a different schedule, I could have pretty high expectations for those teams. But I mentioned, I think not only do those 2 teams have the toughest schedules in the SEC, I think they have the 2 toughest schedules in the country. Which one of those 2, Oklahoma or Florida? Now, I realize your real answer may be that each of them are going to flop against that schedule. But if you had to pick one that you feel a little bit better about their chances of succeeding, let's say success is 9 and 3 or better. Because I think either school, if they could get to 9-3 with as tough as their schedules are, they'd be in the playoff conversation 9-3. Which one has a better chance, do you think, of getting to 9-3 or better, Oklahoma or Florida?
I think Oklahoma does because I just don't think Billy Napier is that good of a coach. He's just, I mean, he did well at Louisiana, but I just don't think of him as that good a coach. Brent Venables, granted, has never been a head coach, but the thing about Brent Venables, I think anybody that follows college football would say he's an exceptional defensive coordinator. And I think he's got some pretty good players on that defensive depth chart. Had them last year. I think he can do something with his defense. And he added 2 potentially dynamic players. You mentioned John Mateer, outstanding quarterback at Washington State, 2-way guy can run and throw. He's a big time addition. And then to top it off, they go out and get Cal's running back, Jaden Ott. So 2 high profile positions, they're much better. And then go back and look at last year. I don't know if I've never heard of a team losing its top 5 receivers to
Hmm.
injury. And that's what happened to Oklahoma. Combine that with an offensive line that was all new, that was pretty much revamped via the transfer portal. And I think that is a risky area when you're trying to revitalize your offense with transfers in the offensive line. I think continuity matters more in the O line than maybe it does at other positions. So that was way too much to overcome. But last part of the year, and your quarterback's not playing well. How could he without all those receivers, with an offensive line, troubled offensive line? Still, Oklahoma beat Alabama 24-3, a team in contention for the playoff. I I don't know, and maybe part of it is knowing Oklahoma's history that it doesn't usually go that long without
Hmm.
success. And did go back a little bit. He started out 6-7 and then turned it around to 10-3 the next year.
Right.
See,
So maybe this is the bounce back year that we saw in year two. Yeah.
maybe, but Billy Napier's never had that. He hasn't had that bounce back year. 8-5 doesn't. That's not 10-3.
Yeah,
So
I think I would pick Oklahoma too, John, as far as like who has a better chance of surviving the schedule and getting to playoff contention between Oklahoma and Florida. I think I might say Oklahoma because not so much because of the X's and O's acumen of either coach. I sometimes I think that's can be difficult to evaluate, but I think something you said earlier with Florida and the supporting cast. I like the supporting cast better at Oklahoma. I like both quarterbacks. I think DJ Lagway, top 5 quarterback in the conference. I think John Mateer will prove himself a top 5 quarterback in the conference. I think on both sides of the ball, Oklahoma has a better supporting cast to complement its quarterback than what Florida has. Florida was too quiet in the transfer portal. They were not nearly as active as they should have been. That, to me, is one of my biggest critiques of the Billy Napier tenure. There's not been enough sense of urgency in the transfer portal where I feel like at Oklahoma, you look at bringing in Mateer, bringing in Jaden Ott, the other talent they brought in, like you could see there's a sense of urgency there at Oklahoma. Now I don't know how they're going to fare against the schedule, but I think if I had to pick one of the two, Florida or Oklahoma, to be able to survive this schedule and still be left standing in vicinity of the playoff in November, I would lean Oklahoma over Florida. And yet, nonetheless, John, as we move up our list, I have Brent Venables, who you had at number 4 on your list. We see this situation very similarly as well. I have Venables at number 3 on my list. A notable development at Oklahoma, Joe Castiglione, the longtime athletic director at Oklahoma, been a very good AD there for a very long time. One of the moves that he made that I don't agree with was giving Brent Venables a contract extension and making him harder to fire before last season. Well, now Castiglione's retiring. They're going to have a new AD there. I don't think that's a great development for Brent Venables. I would rather ride it out with the guy who gave me an extension and made it harder to fire me a year ago rather than take my chances with a new AD who's not been hired yet. If the AD search drags on forever at Oklahoma, that could help Venables a little bit. But if they get the heir apparent in place, I would think that's not a great development for Brent Venables if this season goes south. So we're seeing this one similarly. I had Billy Napier at 4. You have him at 3. I have Brent Venables at 3. You have him at 4. Not much disagreement there.
no, but you make a really good point. If you look at what Venables did and has done in the transfer portal, and look what Napier's done, or even go back to when Napier took over the program, kept talking about laying a foundation, about building the program the right way. That's the kind of stuff you said in college football 30 years ago. Yeah, he has not demonstrated to me a sense of urgency. If you're on the hot seat, and he was on the hot seat, even though he won 8 games last year, you can't deny he was on the hot seat.
Oh, absolutely. I think he was on the hottest seat in the country at one point in that calendar.
Well, then you got to go hard in the portal. So that raises the question: are NIL investors at Florida? Are they just still saying, I'm not sold on this guy. I don't want to throw a lot of money in there because they didn't score big in the portal. You look at what Lane Kiffin keeps doing in the portal. You look at what Brian Kelly did this offseason in the portal at LSU, built a number one transfer portal class in the country. And
Or you
even
look at what Oklahoma did.
exactly. Here you got two guys in a similar position, and Billy Napier's basically saying, "Yeah, I'm good. I got what I need." And Brent Venables is saying, "I know he had a worse record, but it wasn't that big a difference, a couple of games." But Brent Venables saying, "I'm done if I don't get this thing going. I'm done. This is my last year." And that makes me feel better about Oklahoma's NIL backing than Florida's. It makes me think, even though Oklahoma boosters aren't sold on Brent Venables, how could they be? That they've got the money and the resources and the motivation to still try and be as good as they can. And even though they have a coach on a hot seat, they go out and get one of the top quarterbacks in the country and an elite running back as well. So I just, for sense of urgency, I've never felt that Billy Napier had that.
Yeah, I don't disagree, and I think it will be. If he is indeed fired this season, I think that's one of the things you can point to is never had the proper sense of urgency at Florida, in particular, when his back was against the wall, didn't show it in mining the transfer portal, I think the way Florida needed to. So we're down to our top two, John. I think I know who your two are. I don't know what order you're going to have them in. So who's your number two?
It's Mark Stoops. I just we kind of, I think we've analyzed him appropriately already. Just don't, I you know I don't think they can beat Vanderbilt in Nashville this year. I mean, they were 1-7 in the SEC last year, and your Hail Mary is to recruit Zach Calzada as your quarterback out of the portal. I mean, is that going to bail you out? So to me, Kentucky could be bad or worse this season than it was last season. And I don't see it beating Ole Miss this go round.
Yeah, and the other, you mentioned it earlier, John, becoming the second best program in the state. Louisville trounced Kentucky last season, and that's what you were getting at. And Louisville's going to be top 25 preseason, I think, this season, I believe.
I
You get
agree.
trounced by Louisville. I mean, Mark Stoops may not even have a job by the time it gets to that game, but you go into that game fighting for your job and get trounced again by Louisville. that could be the final straw there.
Yeah, and you bring up something that's, I think, worth discussing. We're talking about all these guys on the hot seat. What do you think is the earliest anybody will get fired in the SEC? Any of these, any of our five hot seat coaches, what do you think would be the earliest that somebody
Uh,
would get fired?
I think early October, and I'm going to save further elaboration on that subject until I get to my number one on my list, John. So I'll tease it by saying about early October, and we'll circle back to that when I get to my
I
number one,
can't wait.
which may be the same number one that you have stored up, because my number two, John, is Hugh Freeze. You had him at number 5. I have him at number 2. I look at that 11-14 record at Auburn, and then look, it's not fair to blame Hugh Freeze in any way for what happened under the Brian Harsin tenure. However, when you add that into the mix, it's now 4 straight losing seasons for Auburn, 2 under Harsin, 2 under Freeze. I think this is a program that is starved for success, and I think starving Auburn fans, starving Auburn boosters, that's not a group you want to put your long-term future in their hands, right? If they're starving, I think you're on a warm seat. Now, Hugh Freeze first couple years, I think by all accounts, anecdotally, seems like he did okay with the boosters, and that's so important, as we know, at Auburn. But by year 3, something has to change, because a 5th straight losing season on the Plains, 3 of which would be under Freeze, that's just not something you could survive, I don't think, as an Auburn coach. And I don't think even 6-6 or 7-5 necessarily saves him. So I think there is a path out of trouble for Hugh Freeze, because would I rather have his schedule or the Oklahoma or Florida schedule? No, I'd rather have the Auburn schedule. But just as we assess it here in the preseason, I've got Hugh at number 2 on my hot seat pecking order.
Yeah, that's how I look at it in the sense that he has a chance.
Yeah.
The schedule gives him a chance. It's not an easy schedule. And what I don't like is playing Baylor in the first game.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is a crucial game for Auburn, because if I don't know if fans realize how good Baylor is, and I'm not saying it's some football powerhouse, but it finished strong last year. It's got some good players. And I think in any non-conference matchup, particularly early on, SEC opponents always play a little bit harder when they're confronted with the mighty SEC. Baylor will be very well motivated for that game. But it's one thing losing to Georgia or LSU or somebody, but losing to Baylor to start a season, and then you look at the SEC schedule to come, and you're already one down. I think that's one of the biggest opening games for any SEC team.
I agree, and it's flying below the radar a little bit. Like there's so much attention, rightfully so, on Ohio State, Texas. I mean, heck, that could be a preview of the national championship. So much attention on LSU, Clemson, a clash of 2 top 10 teams, 2 playoff caliber teams. But in terms of like what it means to a coach's tenure, that opener against Baylor is huge for Hugh Freeze at Auburn. So, all right, John. So our first 4 names, we have the same 4 names in a different order, but on each of our lists, somewhere 2 through 5, you'll find Mark Stoops, Billy Napier, Brent Venables, and Hugh Freeze. Different order, but all 4 names are somewhere 2 through 5 on our list. So that leaves the mystery man at number 1. Who do you have on the hottest seat in the SEC?
I have the same coach that you do, and he's probably the most likable of all the hot seat coaches. Sam Pittman at Arkansas. Remember, I don't think he'd ever been a coordinator before he got the head coaching job. Very good reputation as an offensive line coach. Has that known as a, quote, players coach, whatever that means. He's high likability. Mm-hmm. But you just observe Sam Pittman, and you really don't think of, and this is a head coach. This is an SEC coach. I never have thought that about him, even when he was doing better. I just didn't see his making it there at Arkansas, and I think he's probably run out of time. And I almost wonder if he'd kind of rather just get it over with, ready to cash it in, no pun intended, and get out and just kick back and retire from college football and never even think about NIL and all that, getting the transfer portal again.
Well, we mentioned on the pod before, John, there was a story in The Athletic several months back in which Sam Pittman pointed to his plans after it ends for him at Arkansas.
Yeah, I read that.
And he said he's going to retire, and he's got that lake house there at Lake Hamilton in Arkansas. It's never a great sign for someone's long-term tenure, I think, when they're already discussing what happens when their tenure ends, and then that next move is retirement. I mean, I think he's kind of tipping his hand there and maybe being very realistic about his future at Arkansas. But hey, look, when the good times were good, they were pretty darn good for Arkansas at Sam Pittman. Won 9 games in 2021, have that win against Texas. He got the jukebox rolling. I mean, Arkansas was an embarrassment before they hired Sam Pittman. The Chad Morris era, I mean, that was one of the worst hires of the 21st century. I'm not talking about in the SEC. I'm talking about in all of college football. Chad Morris in Arkansas was one of the worst hires of the 21st century. And we're only 25 years into this century, John. I think at the end of this century, we could still say Chad Morris will rank as one of the worst hires of the 21st century. So Sam Pittman was a necessary and effective bridge, but it feels like that bridge is now you've crossed the water, you've crossed the canal, you're back on the mainland, and it's time to get to whatever's the other side of that bridge. Sam Pittman will turn 64 this season. Now, I know we don't want to go too deep down that road because, well, you believe the old guys can still cut it. I know
I
you
like
got your
it. Yeah, I like it. Sam Pittman to see a kid.
yeah, young man,
Yes,
young man.
future's all ahead of it. Sam Pittman. Think about when I'm talking about. Really looks like a guy. When I watch Brent Venables on the sideline, I see a guy who knows the pressure's on, the heat's on. Man, he's at Oklahoma. I look at Sam Pittman, and he doesn't remind me of Urban Meyer. As if I lose this game, I just don't want to live.
He
I'd rather
reminds me of a guy who's got his weekend bag packed in the trunk of his car and is ready to head down to Lake Hamilton.
Yeah, he can see that rod and reel.
That's right. He's already got the hook baited.
Yeah, maybe he's got it in the locker room. It's in his car. I mean, that
game ends, you just grab the rod and reel, and out you go.
Yeah, and so, but you're right. He's not the worst coach ever at Arkansas. He's not even the worst coach of the last two. So, and it's not as though there's not. I don't sense any real venom from the Arkansas fan base toward Sam Pittman.
There was probably more venom in 2023 when they were worse.
Yeah,
and last year was a bit of a, I guess you could call it a rebound year. They were 7-6. I mean, not a roaring rebound, but it was better than it was in 2023. And so I think that, but going 7-6 last year, they won a bowl game for whatever that means anymore. But they won a few SEC games. They upset Tennessee. Whatever venom was there in 2023, I think the venom dialed down last season. But I just think at this point, it's like everybody looks at this as like, this was a great transition, or a good transition. I'm about great, but it was a good transition away from the Chad Morris era, which was an absolute joke. There were some good times, but it's time for whatever's next. And history may look back on this, and we may say Sam Pittman was a better coach than whoever comes next. I don't think it's a guarantee that whatever's on the other side of this for Arkansas is better than Sam Pittman. This is a hard job. It's not the hardest job in the SEC, but it's a hard job. It's on the toward the end of the list of hardest jobs in the SEC. It's not Kentucky or Vanderbilt or Mississippi State, but it's at the end of the spectrum of harder SEC jobs than not. And so I'm not convinced that what comes on the other side of this is going to be better than Sam Pittman. And the reality is Arkansas had a difficult time filling this job after Chad Morris. That's one reason why they hired Sam Pittman. He was not the first choice. So again, it may not be better on the other side of this, but just knowing the way these things go when you're in year 6 and the momentum is kind of gone from the pinnacle of your tenure, whatever momentum was there after that 2021 season when they went 9-4, that's gone now, and they've been kind of treading water the last few years. I think we're reaching the end of the road for Sam Pittman at Arkansas. And getting back to your earlier question of when's the earliest a coach could be fired, I mentioned October. Here's Arkansas. Arkansas starts off with a couple winnable games, but then you get to week 3, and here's what the next stretch looks like for Arkansas, John. In week 3, it's at Ole Miss, then at Memphis, then Notre Dame, then a bye week, then at Tennessee, and then Texas A&M and Auburn, if you even make it that far.
Yeah, and there's an interim coach right there.
Oh, here we go.
Oh, yeah. So I agree with it. I agree that he would be the first coach to be fired, and I could see it sooner than later. And then you put Bobby Petrino there, and he begins auditioning for his second run with the Razorbacks. As hard of a job as Arkansas might be, he had it number 5 in the country.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know that Bobby Petrino is the next coach at Arkansas, but to your point of an audition, look, here's the way the Arkansas schedule ends. It's at LSU, at Texas, and then against a Missouri team that I think is going to be pretty salty. Hey, if Bobby P goes out and wins 2 of those 3 or all 3 of them, well, then maybe he should be the next coach at Arkansas and dial it back, right? If he looks terrible in the interim coach's role, then you've answered that question. That you can put that to bed and move on to your coaching search. But to me, it's kind of it could be a worthwhile experiment. If things go south quickly this season for Sam Pittman, you make that move early enough. You see what Petrino can do as an interim, and then you make your decision accordingly based on how that looks.
Yeah, but you bring up that schedule. I don't think he's going to win a huge support by how he finishes the season. I think he needs to point to how much better he's made the offense in his time there. Now give me time not just to build an offense, but to build a team. That would be his selling point.
All right, well, we have the same 5 names on our hottest seats in the SEC. John, any runners up? I thought about Jeff Lebby at Mississippi State. He's only in year 2, but they went 2-10 last year, and we know how quickly Mississippi State can move on. They fired Zach Arnett before ever got to the end of year 1. So I considered Jeff Lebby on the heels of a 2-10 season. There's going to be a lot of attention on Brian Kelly this year in year 4 at LSU, particularly if LSU doesn't make the playoff. I think unless it's an absolute disaster for LSU and Brian Kelly, I think he's going to get 5 seasons there. For better or worse, LSU hitched its wagon to Brian Kelly, giving him the 10-year fully guaranteed contract. So I think it would have to be a complete disaster for Brian Kelly to be fired this year. So those were other names I guess I gave some consideration to, but I don't I didn't think any of the 5 on our list should be swapped out in favor of one of those 2 names.
Wasn't even close. I mean, and there's a difference in being under pressure and being on the hot seat.
Totally
Kalen
agree.
DeBoer succeeded
Yes.
Nick Saban. He automatically was under the gun. Brian Kelly came to LSU to win a national championship. Everybody knows that. That's the expectation. That's the standard. So yeah, maybe I'm trying to think of a wild card. Mississippi State fired Joe Moorhead after 2 years.
Yeah.
Jeff Lebby.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and then look deeper. Maybe Vanderbilt would decide that Clark Lee's having a little too much success, and that's detracting from our academic reputation.
Or did he set the bar too high last year, right? Does Vanderbilt now have diluted expectations that they're going to beat Alabama every season? But yeah, those guys, I think what we're getting at is like they're clearly onto another tier. I think that
yes.
That misses this top 5. But I'm sure we'll have much more attention on this hot seat list as the season unfolds. We'll stick with you here. It's getting close now. We'll be with you each and every week leading up to the season opener. As always, if you like what you hear on the podcast, we'd appreciate it if you could hit the subscribe button or give us a rating or review. Those ratings and reviews help us find more listeners. And until next week, thanks for listening to SEC Football Unfiltered.